So what comes to your mind when you hear the word Antarctica? Most likely, cold, snow, ice, and penguins. Yet, this is one of the least explored regions in the world that hides many strange and unique things. Check them out. You don't have to go to Antarctica to see this weird thing. All you need to do is open Google Earth and move to one of the southernmost islands of Antarctica, King George Island. Recently, internet users have noticed a large and pretty strange cave entrance there. Where does this wide, dark passage lead? People started making suggestions. It's the entrance to a secret base or some laboratory. This is the part of the spaceship that crashed there thousands of years ago. This is the door to the ancient city of Antarctica. Perhaps there's a giant rock mountain with an ancient cave beneath all this snow and ice. Well, there's some ideas. Users have calculated the approximate dimensions of this cave. It might be about 74 feet high and 250 feet wide. You could hide a Boeing passenger jet in there. Nature probably created this entrance. This is a logical explanation, but there are two strange factors. First, take a look at the foot of the mountain. It seems that there are steps there. They're dark in color, as if they're made of stone. And if you look closely, you can notice something similar to human footprints. Has anyone entered this cave? Or maybe someone is still living there now. The second oddity is the disappearance of the mysterious finding. For the first time, people noticed it in a Google Maps snap in 2007. Then the entrance disappeared. Then it reappeared a few years later. After that, it vanished. And in 2022, people saw it again. Perhaps old snow melts, a new layer falls, and then the wind blows it away and the cycle repeats. But the alleged steps leading deep into the cave make one doubt the natural origin of this tunnel. You can easily find the coordinates on the internet and visit the cave via Google Earth. You might see something there and tell the world. There's another strange thing people discovered with the help of Google Earth. In 2020, one user found a strange object that looked like a giant ship 100 miles off the coast of Antarctica. It was covered with ice and snow and lying on its side. It looked like a cruise ship. You could notice the windows, the deck, and the bridge. But not all people agreed with this. Some claimed it was a spaceship. Others said it was some kind of secret building. The user who first noticed the ship stated that its size was about 400 feet, which is the perfect length for a passenger vessel. But what is this ship doing in such a remote place in the middle of a glacier? How did it get here? Who was its captain? No one has found the answers to these questions yet. In 2016, people using Google Earth discovered a photo of an unknown sea monster floating off the coast of Antarctica. This creature resembled a giant squid with a length of about 200 feet. This is slightly shorter than 3 train cars. Just imagine this kraken swimming in Antarctica's dark, icy waters and dragging to the bottom everything it meets on its way. Maybe it's the great and terrible Chulu, or one of its offspring. You will quickly notice this blood-red waterfall among Antarctica's endless, dazzling white landscapes. Don't worry, it's not blood. For many centuries, the waterfall has been painting snow in a bright red color. The stream flows straight out of a white iceberg. Let's look inside and find out what's happening there. Millions of years ago, there was a small crystal-clear pond, but then a glacier formed around it. A thick layer of ice and snow blocked sunlight, heat, and oxygen access. For millennia, the reservoir remained in this cold vacuum. But at one point, the water made a hole in the icy wall and broke out. When this salty water comes into contact with oxygen, it immediately turns scarlet or rusty. Antarctica is the only place where you can find such a unique natural phenomenon. One of the driest places on Earth is located in Antarctica. It's one of the most lifeless deserts in the world, the McMurdo Dry Valleys. In this desert, you won't see the scorching sun, hot sand, and cacti. A desert means a place with a lack of precipitation and life. The McMurdo Dry Valleys meet these parameters. But this place is also unique for Antarctica, since you won't find glaciers there. Despite the frost, ice can't form in the desert because it hasn't rained for millions of years there. It also never snows. A strong wind coming from the mountains reaches speeds up to 200 miles per hour. It would be difficult for you to stay on your feet there. The wind is filled with moisture. It heats up and evaporates all the liquid and snow in the desert because of its high speed. Only dry air reaches the ground. But you can find several lakes there. They don't freeze, only thanks to the high concentration of salt. The water is so salty that large life forms can't develop there. But scientists have found microscopic organisms near the lakes. 20 million years ago, Antarctica was filled with swamps and trees and swarming with insects and animals. But now, it resembles the surface of Mars, literally. Scientists and astronauts are exploring such regions as the McMurdo Dry Valleys, since the natural conditions there are similar to those on the Red Planet. So, before you go to Mars, you can practice living in similar places on Earth. Also, scientists discovered an underwater world in the Antarctic filled with hundreds of amphipods, crustacean animals similar to shrimp. Wait a minute, it happened in the Antarctic? But the McMurdo Dry Valleys are located in Antarctica. Well, the words are very similar, but what is the difference? Oh, and don't forget the Arctic. The Antarctic is the region in the southernmost part of Earth that houses the continent of Antarctica, and the Arctic is another land altogether. They have the same natural conditions – frost, ice, and snow, but they're located in different parts of the planet. The Arctic is at the North Pole, Antarctica is at the South Pole. Now, back to the discovery. Scientists put forward theories that the ice of the Antarctic hides a vast network of freshwater rivers and lakes. And in 2022, they found a new ecosystem. Researchers explored the Antarctic Ross Ice Shelf and its underwater rivers. This is a massive piece of ice floating in the ocean. A team from New Zealand used a special drilling rig equipped with a hot water supply to drill a hole 1,640 feet deep. That's more than the height of the Empire State Building. Then, they lowered some video cameras and saw thousands of crustaceans swimming in different directions. So it seems they're very unorganized. In the waters of the Antarctic, you can also meet some of the scariest creatures on the planet. These are sea spiders. They got this name because they resemble land spiders, but they're actually a species of marine arthropods. And unlike land spiders, those in the ocean are much larger. They look like 8 strong legs without a body. One such spider can be a dinner plate in width. Some of them have no eyes and have proboscises instead of jaws. Sea spiders are poorly studied because they live in deep, cold waters. Antarctica hides many little-known animals. There are long tunnels in its glaciers leading to scary darkness. On this cold continent, people have found the remains of giant dinosaurs and other ancient creatures, such as the ancestors of modern ducks. Many underground rivers and lakes hide unexplored wildlife. Even the ice here can be weird. Take a look at these striped icebergs. They have blue, black, green, and turquoise shapes. The color depends on the conditions of the water during freezing. For example, green lines appear because of algae, blue ones form when the water freezes too quickly. Okay, I'm freezing. Time to go thaw somewhere warmer. Hawaii. Yeah.
See how the Antarctic Peninsula looks just like South America, but upside down? This isn't just a coincidence. It's the ghost of a 30-million-year-old breakup. These continents were once connected, but their divorce gave birth to an ocean current so powerful it was capable of completely freezing Antarctica and shaping its landscape. Here's how it went down. Tectonic plates pulled a sneaky move and cracked open a ridiculously narrow passage in the ocean, about only 500 miles wide, forcing 4.5 trillion cubic feet of water to flow inside this geological straw. This was the birth of an ocean current stronger than the Amazon River. This ocean current, called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, by the way, flows in a circular motion, going clockwise because of the strong winds that blow over there. This circular motion around Antarctica caused erosion, shaping the landmass of the continent into a circle, except for that stubborn peninsula, which is being slowly dragged east like a kid refusing to leave a playground. Wait, South America and Antarctica used to be one? Yep, a long time ago. South America, Australia, and Antarctica were all part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, which also included Africa at some point. Back then, South America and Antarctica used to be basically joined at the hip by a land bridge called the Antarctic Land Bridge, which just so happened to be a lush green forest and also a great dinosaur highway. Yeah, you heard it right. Dinosaurs. A 95-million-year-old dino, whose name I can't pronounce, sorry, was discovered in Australia, and scientists found out it had actually been a distant cousin of Argentina's Sarmientosaurus. Same jaw, same chisel teeth, same everything. These guys were like identical twins, separated by an ocean. How? Because back then, Antarctica wasn't a frozen wasteland. It was a temperate rainforest, like Oregon, making it a pretty nice travel route for a dino family. But the land bridge wasn't just for dinosaurs. About 40 million years ago, the ancestors of Australia's marsupials waddled to the land down under all the way from South America, taking the Antarctica route, another proof that these continents used to be connected. Things remained somewhat peaceful for the dinos and the marsupials until Earth's ground started moving. This is what a German scientist called the continental drift theory, back in 1912. Our German friend here basically looked at the coast of South America and went, "Hey, this looks like it could fit into the coast of Africa." Like a scientific Sherlock Holmes, he noticed what others had overlooked for centuries. The continents were clearly pieces of a larger puzzle. And he was right. Here's the deal. Planet Earth is made of many layers of rocks and metals, like a cosmic onion. The outermost layer, the lithosphere, is divided into pretty solid tectonic plates that move atop a layer of softer, somewhat molten rocks, like slippery ice. This is why the plates move. In fact, they've been rearranging Earth's face for billions of years, with supercontinents forming and breaking apart in cycles, like a slow-motion game of bumper cars. This movement might be pretty slow since most tectonic plates only move 0 to 3.9 inches every year, except for the Nazca plate, racing ahead at 7.8 inches, about as fast as your hair grows. But don't let their snail's pace fool you. These shifting slabs are the ultimate planet shapers. Their slow dance gives us everything from earthquakes that build mountains like the Himalayas, to rifts that birth oceans like the Atlantic. All because the oceanic crust is dense and sinks like a stone, while continental crust floats like a cork. It's this density difference that explains why continents exist at all. Without it, Earth would be completely covered by shallow seas. This slow-motion planetary renovation project is exactly what tore South America and Antarctica apart 30 million years ago. The plates under these continents started to drift apart in a process called crustal extension. It's like the lithosphere was pizza dough being slowly stretched until it thins and splits. As the crust stretched, it became thinner and weaker, eventually cracking like the surface of a drying lake bed. This whole thing gave birth to a new tectonic plate, the Scotia Plate, that emerged between South America and Antarctica, like a geological divorce lawyer. For a while, parts of this plate stayed above water as the last gasp of the Antarctic land bridge. It was Earth's version of that one thread still connecting your hoodie after the zipper breaks. These final connections might have persisted as chains of islands, but just like that fraying hoodie, the connection couldn't last forever. Eventually, this small but mighty plate became the final nail in the coffin of the land bridge connecting the two continents. Just like all the tectonic plates, this one was also on the move. As it expanded eastward, it opened a new passage of water called the Drake Passage, slowly covering the Antarctic land bridge with ocean water. The process was like pulling open elevator doors, at first just a crack, then wider and wider until the connection was completely broken. This geographical divorce had chilling consequences. The new Drake Passage allowed the Antarctic circumpolar current to form, creating an endless loop of cold water that isolated Antarctica, shaped its land, and even cooled the entire planet. This current acts like a wall around Antarctica, blocking warm water and invasive species while regulating global climate. Eventually, Antarctica turned into an icebox that is 98% covered in ice sheets, and that holds about 61% of Earth's freshwater. Nowadays, this continent holds the title of the windiest, driest, and iciest place on Earth. It's a frozen desert where temperatures plunge below -128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze your breath mid-air. A layer of ice there can be more than a mile thick, and it expands even further in winter to cover an area larger than the continental United States. Today, if you want to travel to Antarctica, the quickest sea route is through the Drake Passage, a 500-mile-wide body of water that is narrow enough for the winds to scream across thousands of miles, transforming into monstrous waves that can tower up to 49 feet. Though calm days create waves only 13 to 16 feet high. Still twice as tall as Atlantic waves, mind you. This is probably why sailors call this stretch of ocean the Drake Shake. But tectonic movement isn't just about shifting continents. It's Earth's ultimate life support system. You see, about half of our planet's heat comes from radioactive decay in the core. Thanks, uranium-235. Something like nature's nuclear reactor. This heat is behind everything from volcanoes to the very plate motion that once connected Antarctica to South America. And it only comes out of the core because of tectonic movement. Without this internal heat engine, Earth would be just like Mars. When the plates move and release heat, they also release CO2 gases into the atmosphere, regulating the temperature of our planet. And when the plates move underwater, they take a lot of this CO2 back to Earth's interior, recycling all this gas. This is why the plates can change our air, climate, and even the evolution of life itself just by moving around. But billions of years ago, these plates were not moving around. Back then, it was like Earth was wearing a solid ceramic shell with many cracks. But even without tectonic movement, the heat managed to escape through these cracks in a process called stagnant lid tectonics, kickstarting all life on Earth. And no, tectonic movement is not a thing of the past. Earthquakes are the living proof that it is not just happening today, but might repeat again on a more dramatic scale in the future. You see, to form supercontinents like Pangaea, smaller megacontinents have to dive beneath another. And scientists predict that a similar process might create a new supercontinent called Pangaea Proxima in 250 million years. By then, humans might be extinct or living on Mars, but Earth's tectonic dance will continue, even without us. Not bad for something that moves more slowly than a traffic jam. Turns out, Antarctica and South America used to be BFFs before all that tectonic drama split them up, like a messy breakup that literally froze one of them out. Now, they just awkwardly mirror each other from across the Drake Passage. Classic exes. There's a stretch of water that even the most experienced explorers fear. No matter what season you choose to cross it in, you risk meeting face-to-face with waves that can reach as tall as the Hollywood sign. I'm talking about the Drake Passage, the waterway connecting the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, stretching from Cape Horn at South America's southernmost tip to Antarctica's South Shetland Islands. It's about as wide as the distance from London to Berlin and takes up to 48 hours to cross. Some sailors compare getting on the other side to going to the moon. That's how challenging it is. Even the man who discovered it, Sir Francis Drake, never sailed these waters because they seemed too dangerous to him and opted for a calmer, although longer, Strait of Magellan. The passage took the lives of around 20,000 sailors and over 800 ships. Tourists who want to see Antarctica cross the Drake Passage on a regular basis, although it's still often called the world's most terrifying ocean crossing. The Antarctic Peninsula, where travelers go, isn't really part of Antarctica itself. It sticks out and points towards South America like two fingers almost touching it. The water gets squeezed between these two landmasses, making strong ocean currents. The passage is part of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest ocean current on Earth. The water rushes through the passage at a speed between 95 and 150 million cubic meters per second, which makes it rougher. And then there are winds that usually blow from west to east and are very strong between 40 and 60 degrees latitude. That's why those areas are called the Roaring 40s, Furious 50s, and Screaming 60s. Land slows down winds, which is why storms hitting Ireland and the UK get weaker as they move east. But Drake's latitude is the only place where winds can blow all around the Earth without being stopped by land. So they keep getting faster. These strong winds turn into huge waves that can hit ships really hard, normally around 13 to 16 feet tall. They're much higher than waves in the Atlantic. Drake Passage also has underwater mountains that you can't see. The huge current squeezes through this narrow passage and causes waves to crash against these mountains underwater. These internal waves create whirls that bring cold water up from the deep ocean. So it's not just rough on the surface, the water is wild all the way down. The first sailor managed to sail around Cape Horn and through the Drake Passage in 1616. It was a Dutch navigator, Willem Schouten, in 1616. But the most famous attempt to cross it was undertaken by Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton on his ship named Endurance. He and 27 of his men set off from South Georgia, aiming to reach Vassal Bay in Antarctica. But things didn't go as planned. On January 19, 1915, their ship got stuck in the ice. And by October, it began to sink. They camped on floating ice for 2 months before sailing lifeboats to a remote, icy place called Elephant Island. Shackleton and 5 men made a risky journey to South Georgia to get help. It took them 15 days to cross Drake Passage with hurricane winds. Finally, they arrived safely and organized a rescue for the rest of their crew. Scientists found the shipwreck of Endurance only in 2022, 10,000 feet below the water. In December of 2019, 6 fearless athletes decided to cross the Drake Passage by rowing a boat for the first time in history. It took them 12 days of non-stop rowing with a 90-minute rotation of rowers. They managed to do it, and it was probably the hardest possible way to cross the passage. The athletes mentioned it was cold, wet, and dirty, and the waves hit them like walls. The weather in the Drake Passage changes a lot, but ship captains can always see it coming and change their path. They will move the departure time to have a safety margin and not to get stuck in the middle of the passage in the worst possible conditions. Sometimes, the journey will be smooth and calm, and they call it Drake Lake. Other times, people on the ship will feel rough waves, which is called Drake Shake. Some experienced captains who often cross the passage say that the Drake Lake effect happens once in every 10 crossings. And they see the Drake Shake once or twice in every 10 journeys. A schooner or a kayak will probably not survive the journey among giant waves, but modest vessels and cruise ships have sturdy hulls and advanced stabilizing mechanisms. So, the journey isn't that dangerous anymore, but still, it's quite an adventure, especially if you're seasick. If you don't feel like risking it but want to travel from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean by water the fast way, the Panama Canal is waiting for you. People first started thinking about making a water path across Panama in the 16th century. Back then, a Spanish explorer found out that only a thin piece of land separated the two oceans. But it seemed impossible to build it because of the mountains and thick jungle, so the idea had to wait a couple of centuries. Finally, in 1880, France, led by the man who built the Suez Canal in Egypt, tried to make the canal. But the people who started the construction soon found out it was much harder than it looked on a map. The land in Panama was one of the toughest and most dangerous places to dig a big waterway. Workers had to literally move huge mountains in a jungle full of snakes, where it was really hot and rainy. During the wet season, heavy rain turned rivers into wild rapids and soaked the workers. Sometimes, they didn't see the sun for 2 weeks, and their clothes stayed wet all the time. Big rocks were falling, and tiny mosquitoes that carried malaria made people very sick. And then, an earthquake happened on top of everything. They were losing thousands of people. That's why France decided to abandon the project after 7 years. Then, the United States bought the French assets in the Canal Zone and finished it by 1914. It cost the U.S. around $375 million. The 50-mile-long passage of water saves ships traveling between New York and San Francisco 7,872 miles. Around 14,000 ships use it every year and pay around $1.8 million in tolls. So it looks like it all paid off. Another challenging waterway in this part of the world is the Amazon River. It's around 4,300 miles long and flows through 3 countries with over 30 million people living in its basin. But there isn't a single bridge across it. The river has many marshes and soft soils, so engineers would need to build very long bridges and very deep foundations, which costs a lot of money. Building bridges over deep water is tough, but in other places in the world, engineers can use things like floating platforms to help. The river's path and water levels change a lot during the year. During the dry season from June to November, the river is usually 2 to 6 miles wide. But in the wet season from December to April, the river can become as wide as 30 miles. And the water level can rise by 50 feet. That's why they can't build floating bridges or pontoons. The riverbanks are made of soft dirt that moves and erodes with the seasons, and it makes things even harder. It would have to be an absolutely unique project to overcome all these challenges. Luckily, there's no pressing need for a bridge across the Amazon right now. The river mostly goes through areas that are sparsely populated, so there aren't so many major roads to be connected by bridges. Antarctica wasn't always a frozen wasteland. A long time ago, it was full of life. And 56 million years ago, something terrifying stalked its jungles. A giant, flesh-eating bird. It was around 6 feet tall and weighed as much as a lion. For millions of years, nothing could challenge it. So why did it disappear? And could there be even bigger predators still hidden beneath the ice? Paleontologists found 2 massive claw bones in Antarctica, sharp, curved, and powerful, belonging to this bird. They were dug up from the Epresian-aged rocks of Seymour Island, which means they're around 40 to 50 million years old. Their shape left no doubt. These were the so-called terror birds. Their scientific name is Forus raceti, some of the most fearsome predators to ever walk the earth. They were flightless and didn't even need wings. Instead, they could sprint at breakneck speeds, like ostriches from a nightmare. For millions of years, these birds ruled South America. But now, for the first time, their presence has been confirmed in Antarctica. No surprise here. Back then, South America and Antarctica were still connected, allowing animals to easily commute between continents. So these birds probably migrated south to adapt to life on Antarctica's prehistoric landmass. It didn't just survive here, it thrived. But at some point, this nightmare of an animal vanished. Why? Most likely because of the temperature changes. Antarctica was cooling, slowly turning into the frozen wasteland we know today. Its prey may have declined, leaving the predator without enough food. Eventually, it disappeared, leaving no descendants behind. Researchers hope that they'll find a complete skeleton eventually. They're also wondering where there might be even bigger species waiting to be discovered. Perhaps these birds evolved into a completely new Antarctic lineage. But for now, all we have are 2 giant, creepy claws. People often think that there are almost no animals or plants in Antarctica. But that's not true at all. Penguins waddle around, and forget the cute tiny ones. Antarctica used to have 6-foot-tall monsters. The emperor penguins are the largest penguin species alive today. They can dive over 1,800 feet deep and hold their breath for over 20 minutes. There were giant ancient penguins around 38 million years ago. They were the size of humans. Fossils show they had long, sharp beaks, making them terrifying hunters of fish and squid. The fish there are also absolutely fascinating. Forget giant squids. Colossal squids are nightmares even bigger. Some reach over 40 feet long with massive, super sharp beaks and eyes the size of dinner plates. Finally, orcas, the apex predators of the Antarctic Ocean. They hunt in packs, working together like a wolf pack of the sea to take down seals, fish, and even massive whales. There are even tiny plants like moss and algae, Antarctic hairgrass and pearlwort. They somehow survive against all odds. There are many other myths going on about Antarctica. For example, some people think that when icebergs break off from glaciers, they immediately start drifting straight into the open ocean until they melt. But the reality is way more chaotic. First, when an iceberg breaks off from a glacier or ice shelf, it has to deal with underwater obstacles. It can stay stuck on the seafloor for decades without moving. Then they get caught in powerful whirlpools and spin in place for months. One iceberg, a 23A, spent nearly 40 years frozen in place before finally breaking free, only to get caught in a swirling ocean vortex for another 8 months. After that, their paths are influenced by ocean currents, tides, winds, and even underwater topography. They don't just float freely. Their movements are full of literal, unexpected twists. And speaking of glaciers, another strange rumor is that some humans can't travel more than 311 miles inland in Antarctica because of an impassable ice wall, freezing jet fuel, deadly winds, and no oxygen. But this is completely false. Antarctica has been explored by planes, vehicles, and even scientists on foot. There's an entire research station sitting at the South Pole. People live there all year long. The ice wall is real, a massive ice cliff rising above the ocean. But that isn't some secret barrier, it's an ice shelf. These are thick slabs of ice that form when glaciers slowly flow off the land and spread over the ocean. Almost 3/4 of Antarctica's coastline is made up of them, but they don't form some giant ring around the world. Antarctica is one of the most extreme places on Earth, but we've conquered its challenges, and we keep learning more about it every year. That's why every year, millions of dollars are poured into keeping research stations running, protecting wildlife, and making sure the people who live there have everything they need. But where does all this money go? Well, Antarctica stations are basically small cities. There's electricity, heating, water purification, food storage, and medical facilities. The biggest station, McMurdo, is basically a town with over 1,000 people in summer. It has everything from a fire station to a gym. The South Pole Station is super deep inland, so it's one of the hardest places to supply. Getting food and fuel there requires airplanes flying thousands of miles in extreme cold. But the internet loves a good mystery. When Google Maps revealed what looked like a massive doorway in Antarctica, conspiracy theorists went wild. People joked about everything from Bigfoot's vacation home to a secret base, or even a Star Trek spaceship hangar hidden in the ice. But there's a way simpler and less exciting explanation. It's actually a grounded iceberg, a chunk of ice that got stuck in shallow water and is now slowly melting. As ice moves across the landscape, it flows around bumps and obstacles, creating odd shapes. The process of melting, breaking apart, and refreezing can carve ice into unexpected forms. Antarctica also has incredibly strong downward-blowing winds that sculpt ice into dramatic formations over time. No secret doorway, unfortunately. And speaking of doors, for years, Ushuaia, Argentina, has been called the gateway to Antarctica, the last stop before the icy continent, the place where expeditions begin. But there's another option. Punta Arenas, Chile. Let's compare them. Ushuaia is closer to Antarctica. It's the top departure point for tourists going on cruises. But no regular flights to Antarctica. No major scientific bases operating from here. It's basically controlled by the military, which refuses to allow private flights, only commercially operated ships. Yes, Punta Arenas is further from Antarctica, but 22 countries and global organizations use it as their main base. There are regular flights to Antarctica happening there every year. Private airlines can actually operate here, making it the real air connection to Antarctica. Ushuaia may have the best location physically, but Punta Arenas actually runs the show. Argentina made a huge error in picking its Antarctic airbase. Instead of setting up a simple, accessible base at sea level, they built Marambio Base, very high, on rough terrain, completely impossible to reach by land. Everything has to be flown in by helicopter, making operations slow, expensive, and frustrating. For 50 years, Argentina stubbornly stuck to this bad decision, while Chile set up efficient, well-planned bases that the world now uses. If things don't change, Ushuaia will be nothing more than a tourist stop. But what's terrifying is that Antarctica seems to be returning to its past. It's supposed to be the coldest place on Earth, but something shocking happened just recently. For the first time in recorded history, temperatures in Antarctica broke 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This continent is buried under miles of ice. Usually, temperatures there can drop to minus 112 degrees. But in the winter of 2020, scientists recorded an insane 69 degrees on Seymour Island, hotter than many places in Europe at that time. Scientists believe there are several reasons for that. First, there are changes in the way heat moves around the planet's waters. Second, melting permafrost due to the planet warming. It looks like the climate is changing faster than expected. This invisible line divides the world into two parts, and most animals, fish, and birds, for some reason, can't cross it. The line is called the Wallace Line, and it runs between Australia and Asia. It has its name after Alfred Russel Wallace, a British scientist and explorer who discovered it in 1859. He traveled to Asia to explore a group of islands called the Malay Archipelago. As Wallace walked through the jungles, climbed hills, and sailed on boats, he noticed something like an invisible wall. On its west side, in places like Borneo and Sumatra, he saw animals you might find in Asia. There were big rhinos munching on leaves and monkeys swinging from tree to tree. The forests were full of life, with all kinds of animals you'd expect to see in a jungle. But in places like Sulawesi and Lombok, just across the imaginary line he came up with, Wallace found animals more like the ones in Australia and colorful birds like cockatoos. The behaviors of animals differ on different sides of the Wallace Line. Some creatures are great at traveling across tough barriers like water, but others are not. For example, bats can fly across open water, but they sometimes cross the Wallace Line. On the other hand, big animals that live on land like elephants usually stay on just one side of the line. Some birds are shy and like to stay hidden in thick bushes and trees to avoid predators. They wouldn't feel safe flying over wide stretches of water with no place to hide. Plants don't stick to the Wallace Line as strictly as animals do, because they spread in their own unique ways, like with seeds carried by the wind, water, or animals. One plant genus, the eucalyptus, mostly stays on the Australian side, but one eucalyptus tree has made its way to the Philippines on the Asian side. Underwater, the Wallace Line doesn't matter as much. The area between the Wallace Line and Australia is called the Coral Triangle, and it's bursting with life. Now, after more than 150 years, scientists think they finally have an explanation of the Wallace Line mystery. They believe it all started about 35 million years ago, when Australia broke away from Antarctica and slowly moved up to crash into Asia. When this happened, the crash created a chain of islands called the Malay Archipelago between Asia and Australia. This caused extreme changes in the weather, which made the area very different and affected which animals could live there. Researchers used a computer model that looked at how more than 20,000 species of animals from both sides of the Wallace Line would have behaved millions of years ago. When Australia started to drift away from Antarctica, It opened up a huge new era of deep ocean around Antarctica. This is where the biggest ocean current on Earth, called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, began to flow. This swirling current made the planet's climate much cooler and completely changed how animals could live in different places. But not all animals were affected in the same way. Indonesia stayed warm and rainy, which was perfect for animals from Asia. These creatures could hop from island to island like stepping stones and make their way toward Australia. But animals from Australia had a harder time. Over millions of years, they had gotten used to living in cooler, drier places, so the tropical islands didn't suit them as well. Scientists believe if we can see how animals adapted to big changes in weather patterns millions of years ago, we might be able to predict how today's animals will cope with a similar situation. Other scientists after Wallace also tried to describe and explain the invisible natural border between Asia and Australia, and came up with their lines. The Weber line, for example, is in a slightly different location than the Wallace line, between the Oriental and the Australasian faunal regions within Wallacea. It's a group of mainly Indonesian islands that are separated by deep water straits from the Asian and Australian continental shelves. They were never connected to the big continents by land, so animals that could swim, fly, or float across the water made it to these islands. That's why the creatures living there are so unique and come from both Asia and Australia. Weber's line is where the balance tips. If you go one way, most of the animals are from Asia. If you go the other way, most of the animals are from Australia. Another important migration event in the history of our planet happened in the Americas. Around 30 million years ago, South America became a separate landmass as tectonic plates moved and pulled it away from Antarctica and Africa. Once it was on its own, the animals living there started to evolve in unique ways and turned into creatures you couldn't find anywhere else in the world. There were animals we still see today, like opossums, giant rodents like capybaras and chinchillas, armadillos, anteaters, and sloths. Some of the animals from those times are now extinct. There were giant ground sloths, bigger than cars, roaming around. There were glyptodonts, which were like giant armadillos with super tough, bony shells. There were also huge, scary birds that couldn't fly but could chase down their prey. Up in North America, animals could still travel to other parts of the world through the Bering Strait. So North America was full of different animals like deer, bison, horses, camels, and even mammoths and mastodons. They all lived alongside predators like big cats, wolves, and bears. About 3 million years ago, the continents of North and South America got connected by a strip of land called the Isthmus of Panama. It formed because the tectonic plates shifted again. Some major volcanic activity between 25 million years ago also contributed to the process. Animals started to move between North and South America, and this long process went down in history as the Great American Interchange. During the Ice Age, huge glaciers in the north grew and shrank over tens of thousands of years. When the glaciers were at their biggest, they held so much water that the sea levels dropped, and forests probably turned into wide grassy plains. So animals had the perfect conditions to cross over. Giant ground sloths were among the animals that went up north from South America, all the way to Alaska. One special kind even roamed the chilly tundras alongside woolly mammoths and caribou. Lots of North American predators decided to explore the South. There were cats like cougars, jaguars, and saber-toothed tigers with their giant teeth. Wolves, foxes, otters, raccoons, and bears also joined the migration. The short-faced bear could stand up to 13 feet tall and weigh as much as a small car. South America also had some funny-looking animals called sanus, or South American native ungulates. These were hoofed mammals that evolved into all kinds of weird shapes while South America was isolated. Big animals from North America, for example, relatives of elephants with strange tusks, came to the south and became some of the largest creatures around. The ancestors of today's llamas settled in the Andes Mountains, and deer, tapirs, and peccaries thrived in the forests. Animals kept moving back and forth between the continents for thousands of years. But as the Ice Age ended, many of the bigger animals, like the giant ground sloths, couldn't adapt and disappeared. It seems North American animals were better at adapting to their new homes. You can find armadillos, porcupines, and opossums from South America in North America. But many of South America's most famous animals like jaguars, llamas, and spectacled bears left North America long ago. Scientists think South America's animals, after being isolated for millions of years, had a harder time dealing with new challenges when their ecosystems changed. In the middle of a dense, foggy forest, you spot glowing red eyes. Suddenly, a strange clicking sound breaks the silence. It's not just in your head. Stretching over 2,000 miles from Newfoundland to central Alabama, the Appalachian Mountains hide terrifying creatures like Bigfoot and the Wampus cat. You might think they're just myths, but there's actually a chilling explanation behind them. First up, the Mothman. This creature is a superstar in the world of horror stories, but not many people know that its legend actually started in the heart of Appalachia, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Back in 1966, two couples were driving when they suddenly came across a human-sized moth, about 7 feet tall, with glowing red eyes. They totally freaked out and sped up, but the strange creature flew and chased after the car, making a screeching sound until it finally disappeared. After this encounter, the group told the police that the creature looked like a tall, muscular man with huge, white wings, but they couldn't see its face because of the hypnotic effect of its eyes. Since then, the Mothman has become a famous urban legend. People swear they've seen similar creatures in other parts of the US, like Chicago and Gallipolis, Ohio. Theories about what people saw range from a balloon with a flashlight tied to it to extraterrestrial beings visiting Earth. But it's also possible that it was just a bird, more specifically, a barred owl. People probably mistook a bird for this creature because the barred owl looks eerie in the dark. It has spooky eyes and makes creepy clicking sounds. Still, these birds aren't huge, so it's strange how they've been mistaken for such a scary monster. Wait, what did people actually see then? The second strange beings are known as the Moon-Eyed People. This was a group of bearded, flat-faced, pale people with big blue eyes who supposedly lived all across Appalachia. Why did I say supposedly? Well, because no one could ever prove they actually existed. The stories about them were part of the Cherokee folklore, so we don't really know how reliable the information is. Still, their legends creeped out both locals and visitors in Appalachia. The Moon-Eyed People were said to come near a house at night, and people inside would hear them talking. But they were warned not to go outside, and no matter what happened, they couldn't watch them. In the morning, they'd find their corn gathered as if someone had helped them. Or the opposite, fields completely cleared like a whole group of men had been working there and taken all the crops. One of the most famous stories about them involves a mysterious stone wall found at Fort Mountain State Park. It was built between the years 500 and 1500, but no one knows who actually built it. Some people believe it was the Moon-Eyed People's work, and the ruins today are proof they really existed. They might not be delusional though. One theory suggests that the Moon-Eyed People were actually Welsh people. At the time, they were in Appalachia, mining the mountains, and the Cherokee gave them this nickname because they lived underground and had great night vision. Hey kitty kitty, come here. Oh wait, what's that? According to legends, the Wampus cat is a half-dog, half-cat creature that roams the Appalachians after dark, or just before dawn. And it can run totally upright on two legs. So So if it comes running after you like a human would, you'd better hide fast and don't look at it. Rumor has it that its yellow eyes can pierce the hearts and souls of anyone unlucky enough to cross its path, driving them to the edge of madness. Okay, that's probably just folklore, but the real-life creature that might be hiding behind these legends isn't much friendlier. The stories describe the Wampus cat as a kind of underwater panther, so some experts believe it sounds a lot like a mountain lion. Apparently, they're really strong swimmers and cross a large lake without much difficulty. Now, let's say you're driving in the Appalachian region at night. Suddenly, you spot an animal in the middle of the road. You slow down and take a closer look. It looks like a deer, but there's something off. Its eyes are too close together, its head is misshapen, its neck is too long, and its legs move in unnatural ways, almost like a puppet on strings. Oh, and even if you honk, this creature won't move. It's definitely not afraid of you. This is the not deer. Although some people have reported sightings as far away as Texas and even Norway, it's definitely an Appalachian myth. One young woman said she was hiking when she spotted a doe. Suddenly, the animal looked right at her, and she noticed that all of its knees were bent backwards. Any direction a deer's knee is supposed to go, the deer's knees did not. Oh my. Anyway, the internet is flooded with people talking about the not deer and its creepy behavior. But the thing is, we can't find a single photo or video that proves it actually exists. So what could it be? One explanation points to sick animals. There's a neurological condition known as CWD that affects different deer species like elk, moose, and even reindeer. It causes the brains of infected animals to degenerate, leading to loss of body functions and abnormal behavior. Since the symptoms match what some people describe as not deer behavior, it makes sense to think this condition could be behind the strange sightings. The last creature on our list, the one and only Bigfoot. You know, that large, hairy, human-like creature that walks upright and roams the dense forest in the US. In the Appalachian Mountains, there have been Bigfoot sightings from the Adirondacks in New York all the way down to the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Georgia. This bizarre figure has haunted our imagination for decades, but scientists believe it could actually be a humble black bear in disguise. It turns out the American black bear is found in many of the same areas where people claim to have spotted Bigfoot. Studies show that for every 1,000 increase in the bear population, there was a 4% increase in Bigfoot sightings. And there are two main reasons why the American black bear could be the perfect imposter. The first reason, they're big. Adult males can weigh up to 660 pounds and grow up to 6 feet long. The second reason, while we think they primarily walk on 4 legs, they are perfectly capable of standing upright. In fact, not only are they capable, they do it all the time. They stand up to get a better look at something, sniff the air, or just to appear bigger when they feel threatened. When they do that, they definitely look like a human-like figure. And for those people who aren't used to being around bears, it's easy to mistake them for something more sinister and out of this world. Now, you might be wondering why so many strange sights and creatures are said to live in the Appalachian, and the answer might be linked to the region's age. The process that led to the creation of these mountains has been going on for over 480 million years, which means they're older than Saturn's rings, for example. Over all this time, the region has gone through some drastic changes in its composition, creating a huge number of ecological niches with varying elevations, slopes, aspects, temperatures, and rainfall. And according to experts, the reason the region is so full of bizarre legends isn't just because the mountains are old, but because they still look old. Since a large part of Appalachia is basically untouched by humans, much of that ancient biodiversity is still around and seems unknown to us. This has created a landscape full of deep forests, mist-covered valleys, and winding rivers. A place where secrets seem to be hiding in the fog. And over the centuries, the isolation of the Appalachians only allowed these stories to grow.
You have an hour before you take your last breath, even though just a second ago you were perfectly healthy and nothing posed any danger to your life. Well, the good news is your life can still be saved. Effective antivenoms are available, but if you choose to neglect the sting, you'll bite the dust for sure. This camouflage artist is the world's most lethal fish. In total, there are around 1,200 venomous fish on our planet, but the stonefish is the toughest one. They've got 13 dorsal fins that can inject extremely poisonous venom. Remember I mentioned camouflage skills? It's the main twist to this story. You see, unlike sharks or any other predator fish, the stonefish won't attack you. It's not a predator, it's prey. So, to stay safe, it needs to somehow protect itself. Thus, it developed a super skill of turning into a stone, sort of. So, if you ever get stung by this guy, it's not because it's aggressive, it's because of an unfortunate course of events. Most people had this unpleasant experience just because they accidentally stepped on a stonefish while it was pretending to be a stone or coral on the bottom. As you might have guessed, something that can easily pretend to be a stone doesn't exactly look cute. These guys are scaleless, their skin is covered in multiple warts, and they are multicolored. You can see shades of gray, brown, and patches of orange, red, and yellow. Sometimes they can even be covered in algae. They occupy quite a large territory in the Indo-Pacific Ocean, which means they're everywhere, from Mauritius to Queensland in Australia. Okay, we're going to need a disclaimer here. This fact is very sensitive, but if you want to live your life long and healthy, I suggest you don't skip it. This is a fly. Pretty harmless and definitely way less powerful than you, a human being, are. Yet, chances are that this gentle buddy can destroy your body. Now here's how the story goes. Some time ago, a lady from the UK decided to go on a cool trip to South America. Sounds exotic and not banal at all. Rochelle, who was 27 back then, went to Peru with her boyfriend. When she got back to her home country, she started having severe headaches. She couldn't understand what was going on. Then, half of her face felt terrible discomfort, and suddenly, some weird sound in her head started haunting her. One day, she went to bed, only to wake up the next morning to see that her pillow was soaking wet with some weird liquid. Not blood, not water, just some substance. She rushed to the hospital, where doctors said she had an ear infection. But when doctors looked closer, they saw a hole in her ear canal. It was around half an inch big, but it was swarming with maggots. Yeah, ooh. Now, Rochelle was lucky. The emergency brain scan showed no major damage whatsoever. The eardrum, blood vessels, facial nerves, they were all right. The big question was how to make the maggots leave poor Rochelle's ear. We all get it, it's pretty tight inside the ears, and even small forceps weren't very helpful. So to save the lady, the doctors decided to use olive oil. They expected the maggots to drown, and indeed 2 maggots did. Yet there were 8 more. The most horrifying thing was that the lab analysis showed that a New World screwworm, that's the official name of the fly that interfered with Rochelle's health, had laid eggs in the ear canal that the maggots were chewing. But how on earth did this happen? Well, while she was on vacay in Peru, she once walked through a swarm of flies. One of them got into her ear. She shooed it away, but it had more than enough time to lay eggs inside. Doctors helped Rochelle evict the unwanted guest, and luckily, there won't be any long-term consequences. But we all get it that it could have been much worse. Now, I don't need to tell you that caving is extremely dangerous, do I? Back in June 1990, a man called Gary Lutz took his sons, Buddy and Tim, on a spelunking adventure to West Virginia's New Trout Cave. He packed food, water, and spare headlamps. But here's where he messed up. He left the pack behind when they reached the maze, a tight spot with jagged rocks. He figured they'd grab the supplies before their headlamps ran out of charge. Oops, bad move. The boys' headlamps went dark soon after, and their attempts to backtrack got them lost. Then, Lutz's headlamp ran out of charge too, plunging them into total darkness. For 5 horrific days, they had no food, no water, and no light. They started coughing up cave dust and hallucinating from dehydration. Luckily, someone noticed that their car had been parked for days and called the authorities. The rescue team pointed out that the family had broken the cardinal rules of caving. Always carry 3 sources of light each, and always tell someone where you're going and when you'll be back. Sadly, some tourists never go back from vacation. They become statistics. And some people sometimes have a narrow escape from the Grim Reaper without even knowing it. Just an example here. A tourist in Australia filmed themselves handling a super dangerous creature and uploaded the footage to Reddit. In the video, the tourist is holding a blue-ringed octopus, with Mandarin writing on the screen saying, "Such a beautiful octopus." After filming, they shake the octopus off their hand and luckily put it back into the water before it could sting them. The thing is, the blue-ringed octopus is one of the world's most dangerous marine animals. It packs enough venom to make 26 adults kick their buckets. The tourist had no clue how dangerous it was. People on Reddit were freaking out. One person commented, "Do they even know how lucky they are to be alive after doing something that monumentally stupid?" A woman from New Hampshire got some nasty burns after veering off the trail in Yellowstone National Park and falling into scalding water near the Old Faithful geyser. The 60-year-old, along with her husband and their dog, had left the safety of the boardwalk and was walking off the designated trail near Mallard Lake Trailhead when she broke through the thin crust over the water. She ended up with 2nd and 3rd degree burns on her lower leg. Luckily, her husband and the dog were fine, but the lady was rushed to a hospital for treatment. Now, park officials are reminding everyone to stick to the boardwalks and trails in hydrothermal areas and be super cautious. The ground there is fragile and thin, with scalding hot water just below the surface. Pets are allowed in some developed areas of Yellowstone, but they're not permitted on boardwalks, hiking trails, in the backcountry, or in thermal areas. Hot springs in Yellowstone have injured and made people meet their early demise more than any other natural feature. At least 22 people have passed away from hot spring-related injuries since 1890. Hey, what's cooking? Oh, it's you. Jumping off a bridge into a river filled with crocodiles. What could possibly go wrong? Turns out, a lot. One New Year's Eve, Australian tourist Aaron Langworthy decided to try bungee jumping off a bridge that connects Zimbabwe and Zambia, right near Victoria Falls. It's a 360-foot drop of pure adrenaline. But for Langworthy, things went sideways when her bungee cord snapped, sending her plunging into the Zambezi River, which is known to be home to plenty of crocodiles. Now, Erin herself says it was a miracle she survived. When she fell, she blacked out on impact and felt like she'd been slapped all over, but the cold water shocked her back to consciousness. Now, it's easy to judge tourists for taking risks like this, but bungee jumping has been a thing at this spot for over a decade, drawing more than 50,000 tourists each year and bringing in much-needed revenue for both Zimbabwe and Zambia. The authorities claim bungee jumping is safe. The probability of an accident like Aaron had is 1 in 500,000 jumps. So I think Aaron should go buy a lottery ticket.
A man went for a walk not far from Buenos Aires in Argentina and found something that looked like a dinosaur egg lying in the mud. When he shared his find with his family, everyone thought it was a joke, but it was actually very real. Except it wasn't a dinosaur egg, but a glyptodont shell. These guys went extinct thousands of years ago. Some of them grew up to be the size of a small car. The Paleo-Indians, who were the ancestors of Native Americans, must have had a fun time living alongside those beasts. People keep finding similar black scaly shells, which are fossils of glyptodonts in the Americas. These creatures thrived in South America for tens of millions of years and also spread up north. They had thick armor, called a carapace, and tough, grooved teeth for eating grass. They weren't always giant, but it looks like a colder climate before the Ice Age, with open woodlands and plenty of grass, helped them evolve. It's pretty hard to hide when you're huge, so they may have developed their fused armor to protect themselves. One of the most famous types had a long tail with spikes that it used to fight other glyptodonts for territory or mates. Although they look similar, the ancient glyptodonts were really different from today's armadillos. Glyptodonts had a hard, heavy armor made of fused plates, and today's armadillos have flexible armor and can roll up into a ball to protect their soft tummies. Plus, glyptodonts ate grass using their grooved teeth, and armadillos prefer insects for lunch. But despite all the differences, recent studies of their DNA showed that glyptodonts actually belonged to the armadillo family. If you think the glyptodont was scary, just wait till you meet the giant short-faced bear. This bad guy grew to almost twice the height of Michael Jordan when it stood on its hind legs. It also weighed over 1,500 pounds, and it was able to run at the speed of over 40 miles per hour. This bear preferred meat to all other foods. Even its skull and teeth were designed for slicing through meat, and it had forward-facing eyes that gave it sharp vision. Its strong jaws and large muscles helped it crush bones to get to the nutritious marrow inside. The giant short-faced bear lived in places like Minnesota and west of the Mississippi River, all the way up to Alaska. It went after or scavenged big animals like bison, musk oxen, deer, and even ground sloths. But it eventually went extinct because its prey didn't survive the Ice Age. Today, the only living relative of the short-faced bears is the spectacled bear from South America. This guy is much smaller, about the size of a black bear, and it eats both plants and meat. Game of Thrones fans, the next one is for you. The orphaned wolf cubs adopted by the Stark family in the epic series were inspired by dire wolves. Their name translates from Latin as terrible wolf. These great uncles of modern dogs were almost 5 feet from head to tail and weighed around 150 to 200 pounds. The oldest record of the dire wolf is from 250,000 years ago. They adapted well to different conditions and lived pretty much all over North America, from as far north as Alaska to down into southern Mexico. They went extinct around 10,000 years ago, soon after the last ice age. They most likely just lost their source of food. The closest we have to dire wolves now is the gray wolf, but don't get too upset. Scientists think they could be able to bring the dire wolf back to life. They can combine intact straps of their DNA, recovered from the museum specimens and the genome of modern dogs. One animal you definitely wouldn't want to be on the de-extinction program is the saber-toothed cat. This bad guy lived in prehistoric North America and parts of South America. And nope, it's not related to modern tigers or other cats. It just went extinct. It had the title of the most fearsome Ice Age predator for a long time, until scientists found out at least one species of it was more like a kitty cat. Smilodon, by the way, Diego from Ice Age was one of those, could only chomp down with 1/3 of the force of modern lions, but it could open its mouth at a 120 degrees angle, and it could wrestle even large prey to the ground with its powerful body, with disproportionately thick front legs and strong neck. The kitty was probably just too afraid to use its long and narrow teeth that could break easily. And one more detail. It had to have lips that could stretch well for the jaws to open wide, so it most likely drooled like a St. Bernard. Well, at least their teeth grew twice as fast as those of modern lions, and fully formed by the age of 3. The giant beavers, called castoroids, must have grown at the same rate, or so to get as big as a couch. They were about 8 feet long and weighed 200 pounds, which is as heavy as a large refrigerator. They had huge 6-inch long front teeth for gnawing, a narrow tail, and long, shaggy fur. This giant creature lived alongside mammoths and saber-toothed tigers in the woodlands of North America. Like today's beavers, the giant beaver probably spent a lot of time in the water since it was too heavy to move quickly on land. Unfortunately, we don't know for sure if giant beavers built equally giant dams. Even if they did, none of those structures survived over time. Some people think a giant beaver built a 4-foot-tall dam in Ohio, but it's just a guess. Eventually, the giant beaver disappeared, just like other big animals from the last ice age. Early human settlers in North America may have sped up its extinction as they probably liked its thick fur and meat. By the Ice Age, mastodons, some remote offsprings of the early elephants from Africa, crossed a land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska and made it to North America. Mastodons, like woolly mammoths, had thick, shaggy fur that helped them keep warm in the cold climate of the Ice Age. But unlike the mammoths, who mostly grazed, mastodons were mostly browsers. They like to eat leaves from shrubs and the lower branches of trees. Scientists often find woolly mammoth fossils together, which means they probably lived in groups, like family herds. Mastodon fossils are usually lying alone. This means they may have preferred living on their own and only came together to mate or for a short time with their young. Sadly, both mastodons and woolly mammoths went extinct around 11,000 years ago, not long after the Ice Age. Scientists think this may have happened because of changes in weather patterns, fewer food sources, and possibly early humans. They figured out that one mastodon could feed a tribe for a week and dress them for years. You can mostly find camels in deserts in places like North Africa and the Middle East now. But scientists believe they actually came from North America, especially the lands west of the Mississippi River. Fossils show that camels appeared on Earth about 44 million years ago. In 2015, a team of scientists from the University of Louisiana discovered the bones of a giant ancient camel in Oregon. This camel was between 12 and 14 feet tall, like a modern giraffe. It lived around 7 million years ago and had a long neck to help it reach high plants. About 6 million years ago, some early camels crossed into Asia over the Bering Strait land bridge. Once they arrived in Asia, these camels split into two types we know today: the Bactrian camel with 2 humps and the dromedary camel with 1 hump. You won't find wild camels in North America anymore, but some of their relatives, such as llamas, alpacas, and guanacos, still live in South America. What do Paris Hilton and Chris Hemsworth have in common? Well, apparently, they both want to bring animals back to life. But we're not talking about making your favorite pet live forever. Nope. These celebs are actually helping a science company bring back animals that no longer exist, like the mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and even the iconic dodo. If everything goes according to plan, these fascinating creatures could be walking among us again by 2028. This groundbreaking effort is led by a company called Colossal Biosciences. At this very moment, they're working on a way to revive the core genes of animals that disappeared from Earth ages ago. The idea is to replicate those genes using DNA from a close, living relative. If that's all Greek to you, don't worry. We'll break it down a bit later. So, the mammoth is one of the animals they plan to bring back, and people are especially hyped about it. These incredible, massive creatures roamed parts of Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America until about 4,000 years ago. Some people might mix them up with modern elephants, but there are some key differences. For starters, they had huge curved tusks that curled inward and were used to dig for food. They also adapted to survive in freezing climates, like having 2 layers of thick fur to keep their blood warm. But mammoths and elephants do have a lot in common. The woolly mammoth shares 99.5% of its genes with its closest relative, the Asian elephant. That's huge because it means that mammoths are genetically closer to Asian elephants than Asian elephants are to African elephants, for example. The company's bold plan is to create a living, walking elephant-mammoth hybrid that looks just like the ones that used to roam the planet. This animal will look like, walk like, and even sound like a woolly mammoth, but most importantly, it'll be able to live in the same ecosystem that the mammoth left behind. If the scientists succeed in bringing back enough of these creatures, one of their big goals is to help restore the Arctic tundra ecosystem. But how do they actually plan to create the mammoth? Here's their plan. First, they need to find well-preserved samples of woolly mammoths in places like Alaska, for example. Then they'll need to sequence the mammoth's genome and the genome of its closest relative, the Asian elephant. The next step is to identify the important genes that made the woolly mammoth perfectly adapted to cold temperatures, like its shaggy hair, curved tusks, and dome-shaped cranium. In other words, they need to identify which genes make the mammoth, well, the mammoth. Now comes the interesting part. They will use top-notch gene editing tools, kind of like scissors, to cut the Asian elephant DNA and replace those spots with the mammoth sequence. This will allow them to create a new cell line and, later, an embryo. This embryo will grow inside a healthy female Asian elephant, who will be the surrogate. And just like that, a new, cold-adapted elephant will be born. Or at least, that's what scientists hope. Specialists predict that this Mammoth 2.0 could be on Earth as early as 2028. The reason it will take a while is that their gestation period is around 22 months. But if that deadline feels too far for you, there is actually a chance we could get a surprise a lot sooner. That's because some of the other animals they plan to revive have a much shorter gestation period, like Australia's thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger. The company is also doing whatever it takes to give this animal a second shot at life. And the good news is that the process seems to be well advanced. Recently, the group announced that the Tasmanian tiger's genome is about 99% complete. This animal was native to the Australian mainland and the islands of Tasmania and New Guinea. A big part of the Tasmanian tiger population disappeared over 3,000 years ago. But about 5,000 of them kept roaming around until pretty recently. It's believed that the last thylacine passed away in 1936. To revive the Tasmanian tiger, scientists first need a sample of the ancient animal. So they took RNA molecules from a 110-year-old preserved head that had been kept in ethanol. The team was really lucky because it's rare to find old samples that are so well preserved, allowing scientists to use advanced DNA analysis techniques. And by that, I mean they did a full, complete analysis. By studying RNA samples from important tissue areas like the tongue, nasal cavity, brain, and eyes, experts were able to learn a bunch of interesting things about the Tasmanian tiger. They could figure out how its brain worked, and also what this beast could smell, see, and taste. By the way, these semi-nocturnal animals had a special appetite for small rodents, lizards, and birds. After finding the perfect sample, the process of reviving it will be pretty much the same as with the mammoth, but with an elephant as a DNA donor, of course. In the case of the Tasmanian tiger, its closest living relative is a small marsupial called the fat-tailed dunnart. Even though this animal is small, it is a ferocious carnivore. So experts believe the whole DNA editing process will work just fine with its sequence. Their goal is to turn a fat-tailed dunnart cell into a thylacine cell. To accomplish that, they did more than 300 unique genetic changes into a dunnart cell. So there is no doubt they're pushing all the boundaries to make the dream of reviving animals a reality. This project also plans to revive the iconic dodo. You know, that funny-looking bird from the paradisiacal island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean? And here, things get a little trickier, since we don't know much about this creature, which has origins that go back about 23 million years. Basically, the only clues we have about what dodos looked like when they were alive come from a handful of drawings, paintings, and written descriptions from the 17th century. But since those pictures are all pretty different from each other, and only a few of them were based on real, live dodos, we're still not 100% sure what they actually looked like. And as for how they behaved, well, we don't know much about that either. That's why reviving this long-absent legend will be super interesting and really enlightening. The sample they used to extract an old dodo genome came from a skull in the collection of the Natural History Museum of Denmark. And the dodo's closest living relative, which will provide the host cells, is the Nicobar pigeon, a gray bird with colorful features found in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in India. If everything goes smoothly, in a couple of years, we might see the fabulous and iconic dodo with our own eyes. Reviving animals might sound impossible, but science and technology together can be a real game changer, not only by protecting today's animals, but also by restoring species that disappeared from the planet long ago. Actually, we've already pulled this off. A wild goat called the bucardo, also known as the Pyrenean ibex, went extinct in the year 2000. But 3 years later, scientists managed to bring it back to life, using a method pretty similar to what we've talked about in this video. It took 57 tries, but one of them finally worked, and a bucardo clone was born. Unfortunately, the animal only lived for 10 minutes. You might think that wasn't a success, but it was actually a huge step forward in the whole animal revival field. Now, specialists can only hope the project to bring back the dodo, the mammoth, and the Tasmanian tiger go a bit better.